When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
Within moments, the man was on my front porch, jiggling the doorknob and trying to open it.
I didn't know him personally, but I think about him all the time. Did he fall? Or did someone push him? Why didn't anyone care enough to walk home with him? Maybe this wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been alone.
From Killer Podcasts. True tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 4 stories that will have you double-checking the doors before you go to bed at night. You can never be too careful, so sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Terra Ashe from Reddit user ssanford0704. The time I was almost kidnapped.
When I was in high school, I worked at a family-owned plant nursery and garden store. At the time, I was a cashier and had been working there for 2 or 3 years. The place I worked was the perfect spot for a teenager. There was a good mix of adult and teen employees, and it was a fantastic place to work. It's important to note that although I was in high school, I also attended a vocational school. The students at this school came from high schools all over the county, so it wasn't uncommon to know people from a few towns over. To get to work and back home, I took the bus or got a ride from my dad. The bus stop was a 15-minute walk from my job, and the ride included a transfer at some point. If the buses were on time, it was a 25-minute commute. With rush hour and late or full buses, it could take over 45 minutes. My dad really only drove me on the weekends. One summer, a boy named Connor started working there. I recognized him from the vocational school we attended. We were friendly at work, but I would never have considered him a friend, just a coworker/acquaintance. I always had an off feeling about him. His mannerisms and actions made me uncomfortable, but he never really gave me a reason to dislike him. It's hard to explain, but it was a gut feeling of some kind. After a few weeks working with Connor, I started to get the feeling that he liked me. He'd frequently pass by whichever register I was working at and sometimes even stop to chat for a minute. I always maintained a friendly coworker vibe and did not do or say anything that would have made him feel different. One day he asked if I wanted a ride home. I found this odd because I didn't think he had a car, as I always saw him skateboard to work. I declined and we went on about our day. The next weekend he asked again, and again I declined. I asked if he had a car and he said no, but he could ask to borrow a car from his parents and drive me home. I told him that wasn't necessary. I didn't mind taking the bus, and my dad was picking me up that day anyway. This exchange probably happened 5 or 6 more times. Gotta give it to him, the boy had some persistence. Each time, I politely declined, but after the 3rd time, it started to creep me out. In my teenage girl mind, I thought I was making it pretty clear that I wasn't interested in spending more time together. The last time Connor asked, I caved. He came up to me as I was opening my registers and said, "Hey, I finally got my own car." I was happy for him, as our conversations at work in recent weeks were about his parents possibly bringing him car shopping soon. I congratulated him and he asked if I wanted a ride home that day. At this point, I was honestly fed up with him pestering. However, it was supposed to thunderstorm all day and I was feeling pretty bummed about having to walk to the bus stop. I thought, what the hell? Maybe if I say yes and let him drive me home this once, he'll stop asking. So I agreed. The day went on and eventually lunch rolled around. I took my break and went to eat in the break room. When my break was almost over, another employee came up and said there was a couple of cop cars in the parking lot with their lights on and 2 officers went into the admin office. The rest of the story is what I pieced together from what others told me. The local police made occasional drive-bys of the nursery. The owners had some family friends who were officers, and they looked out for them. I guess on this day, that family friend cop drove by and noticed a car in the parking lot that had been reported stolen that morning. He pulled over to investigate and called for backup. He and another officer found a backpack very poorly hidden behind a nearby tree. They opened the backpack and found rope, duct tape, a switchblade, and Connor's ID. The officers went into the admin office and told the owners what they found. Connor was called into the office and his parents and uncle were called too. It turns out Connor had stolen his uncle's vehicle that morning. I guess his uncle didn't want to press charges, which is why Connor didn't leave with the police. I don't know if Connor was questioned about the contents of his backpack or what answers he might have given. I hadn't told anyone that he was planning to give me a ride home that day. The owner of the nursery told Connor to leave for the day, and he didn't work there much longer after that. The whole thing creeped me out so badly that I made it a point to avoid him at the vocational school. I remember using humor as a coping mechanism, and my mom and I joked around about the guy who tried to kidnap me. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was scrolling through Facebook when I came across a shared in memoriam post. The face looked familiar to me, but it took me a moment to recognize who it was. Then it clicked. It was Connor. It had been 8 years since the event at the nursery. That experience had been so traumatizing that I'd blocked Connor out from my mind and completely forgotten about him. After some digging, I learned that he died from a drug overdose. I texted my mom, "Hey, do you remember Connor Hale?" My mom responded, "Are you serious? You mean the guy that planned to kidnap you? Of course I remember him." That was all she had to say. I had a vivid flashback of the whole ordeal. I was shocked and concerned that I could block something out like that. Even now, a decade after the event, I'm still trying to process it. Hopefully, telling the story will help me work through the trauma.
Our next story is told by Dallas Stark. If you can't trust your instinct, you can trust your dogs.
I recently had an alarming experience that has left me shaken. I was dog sitting for my boyfriend while he was away on a backpacking trip. His home is in a semi-remote area at the bottom of a hill at the back of a few acres of property. He's right next to the highway, which has a small rural neighborhood on the other side. It's very sketchy and very safe at the same time, meaning that the community is tight-knit, but people frequently keep to themselves. There are lots of abandoned, dilapidated homes right next to pristine, well-kept homes. I'm well acquainted with the neighborhood, however, so I didn't really feel unsafe taking care of my boyfriend's house and his dog, Hennessy. Hennessy is a 115-pound, jet black, American Bulldog, English Labrador mix. He's pure muscle, and he's very protective of me and my dog, Lottie. Lottie is a 57-pound poodle mix. I'm a dog groomer, so she's usually done up in pretty silly haircuts with bows and everything. All of this is to say that one of my dogs is very intimidating and the other is not. Because of Hennessy's strength, however, I cannot walk him and Lottie at the same time by myself. I usually take Lottie on a walk first, then go back and take Hennessy on a walk. At night, I like to walk Hennessy after Lottie because I feel safer with him as it gets later. One evening, as the sun was setting, I was walking Lottie, and as we were heading home, I got the distinct feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I turned to look behind me. About 30 feet away, a tall man in a hoodie was standing next to an old, rundown house. I instantly thought the hoodie was weird. I live in Northern California, and this was early August. It doesn't get colder than 87 degrees in the evening, especially before dark. I forced myself to brush it off, as I tend to be fairly paranoid about these sorts of things. The streets slowly become darker as I walked. I glanced back from time to time and observed the man was keeping pace with me, not breaking that 30-foot distance. If I turned a corner, so did he. If I sped up, so did he. Finally, we reached the highway and I ran across right before a car came speeding past. This put some distance between myself and the tall man, but he continued to follow me. I walked as quickly as I could to the house. I could hear his footsteps in the gravel, but refused to turn and look back at him. Lottie began barking and growling, but I forced her to keep moving. Thankfully, we made it back inside my house and slammed the door behind me and locked it swiftly. Within moments, the man was on my front porch, jiggling the doorknob and trying to open it. Lottie and Hennessy started barking immediately. There's no peephole on my door, but I had no desire to see this unwelcome visitor anyway. I yelled through the door and asked who was there. Through the barking, I heard a man's placid voice. "I love your dog. Can I meet her?" The way he said it was so creepy. There was nothing behind it, as if he'd rehearsed the line beforehand. I yelled back, "No, please go away!" He paused for a second, then repeated, "I love your dog. Can I meet her?" He tried the door handle again, this time pushing his weight against the door. Both of the dogs could tell something was very wrong. The fur on the back of Hennessy's neck was standing up, and he gnashed his teeth as he growled. A wild idea struck me. I picked up Lottie and put her in the bathroom where she'd be safe. I grabbed Hennessy's collar and kept him close to the door with me as he continued barking viciously. The man repeated once again that he wanted to meet my dog. I shouted, "Leave!" He paused, then slammed into my door with the full force of his body, making the door shudder on its hinges. Okay, he wanted to meet my dog so bad? Let him meet my dog. I unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough for Hennessy to get halfway out. Hennessy lunged for the man, and my hand hurt from trying to hold him back. I could hear his teeth clacking as he ferociously chomped towards the man. This dude was not expecting Hennessy. He stumbled back in terror, almost falling to the ground. He cursed as he scrambled away. Without a second look, he booked it out of sight as quickly as he could. I managed to pull Hennessy back in and called the cops. I never got a good look at the guy, so they told me there wasn't anything they could really do, but they did take my statement and told me that they'd contact me if anything ever came of it. I am so thankful for Hennessy. After the police left, I snuggled up with him and Lottie that night and cried as it hit me how terrified I was. I went out the next day and bought him the biggest bone I could find from a pet store nearly an hour away, because he'd earned it. Of course, I got something for Lottie too. She may not have Hennessy's brawl, but she still did what she could to protect me. I'm so grateful the guy didn't have a firearm. Looking back now, maybe I should have just called the cops and kept my door closed. But I hope that since he saw Hennessy, he knows not to come back and mess with us again. If he does, I'll let my sweet boy rip his arm off.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
As a kid growing up in Chicago, there was one horror movie I was too scared to watch. It was called Candyman. It was about this supernatural killer who would attack his victims if they said his name 5 times into a bathroom mirror. But did you know that the movie Candyman was partly inspired by an actual murder?
I was struck by both how spooky it was, but also how outrageous it was.
Listen to Candyman, the true story behind the bathroom mirror murder, wherever you get your podcasts.
Shop Macy's VIP sale, going on now. Use your coupon or Macy's card and take an extra 30% off the latest fall trends from designers that rarely go on sale. And save 15% off skincare, makeup, fragrances, and more. Plus, shop fall specials for even more great deals on top brands at Macy's. Savings off regular and already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
Welcome back to the podcast. Our next story is a reminder that being alone in a park at night is never a good place to be. Narrated by Adam C. Alderson.
Several years ago, I experienced one of the most bizarre and terrifying encounters of my life. I was born and raised in the rural Midwest, and I've lived in my hometown my entire life. Naturally, I'm well acquainted with most of the back roads in my area. One such road is an old highway that no longer has much traffic. It's a long and winding road that offers gorgeous scenic views during the day and a quiet escape from civilization at night. Along this road is a small lot with no more than 10 parking spaces, 2 picnic tables, and a single trash can. It's easy to miss due to the heavily wooded area surrounding it. Due to its secluded nature, it's played host to a fair share of teenage debauchery. I myself spent many a Friday night smoking away with my friends. Needless to say, there were a lot of good memories attached to this place, and over the years it's become one of my favorite spots to venture when I need peace or solitude. One night about 5 years ago, my girlfriend and I were going through a rough patch. We had a big fight, and I stormed out of the house, got in my car, and drove towards my favorite spot in the woods. As soon as I was out of the town limits, I cranked up my angriest metal music and sped down the road, chain-smoking menthols in an effort to calm down. Once I reached the turnoff, I was happy to find there were no other cars in the little parking lot. I had the place to myself. I jumped out of my car, sat down on one of the picnic tables, lit a cigarette, and stared up at the stars. I gazed up at the sky for several minutes, relishing the tranquility. And I heard some rustling coming from the woods. Not wanting to become a chew toy for a coyote or bobcat, I hustled back to the warmth of my car. Once again, I blared my music and decided to have one more smoke before heading home. I was halfway through my cigarette and lost in thought when the sound of pounding on the passenger side of my car rudely interrupted my reverie. The sudden noise made me jump out of my skin, and I turned to see a large hand beating against the passenger window. I turned down my music and heard an angry voice shouting, "Open the fucking door!" He was yanking on the door handle. Luckily, my doors were locked, and after a few minutes, the man disappeared. I gasped in relief, trying to process this unprovoked attack. A sharp noise right next to my left ear destroyed my momentary notion of safety. The man had reappeared at the driver's side and was now punching my window as he screamed and cursed at me to open the door. I was frozen in confusion and fear. I finally snapped out of it and threw my car in reverse. It was so dark I didn't get a good look at the guy, except for a split second he was illuminated by my headlights. He wore a black hoodie with the hood up, a dark gray t-shirt, and a baseball cap. He was a stocky guy, had to be well over 6 feet as he towered over my Sonata. The only distinguishing feature I could make out was a large, dark beard. I noped out of there real quick. I floored it across the parking lot and back towards the highway. That's when I heard it. A loud bang that sounded like a gunshot. I slammed my foot on the pedal and I took the first turn I could. Once I was sure no one was following me, I slowed down and realized I'd been going 90 on a gravel road. At the time, one of my best friends worked for a nearby gas station, so I drove there to tell him the whole story. We looked over my car thoroughly and found a couple of dents on the top of the car and what looked like a boot print on my passenger door. We talked it over and ultimately decided not to call the police. It's a 20-minute drive to the closest town, and we were sure the guy would be gone by the time anyone got out there. In hindsight, I realized this was probably a poor decision. I'm still baffled by this encounter. I don't know if the guy wanted to rob me, steal my car, or worse. I'm extremely grateful that I made it home in one piece. I hope I never meet that maniac again.
Our final story is narrated by Meghan Barylak Smith. Congrats on the nuptials, Meghan. From r/Let's Not Meet. 10 years ago, I was attacked by a stranger.
Nearly a decade ago, when I was 20 years old, I was studying in a lovely seaside city in France. Everyone in this town cycled all the time, to school, work, parties everywhere. It was known as a very safe place, full of tourists and students. I lived and studied there for 3 years and never felt unsafe until my final year there. In December 2014, my boyfriend took me to his engineering school's Christmas party. We had a great time mingling with our large group of friends. One guy from the group left the party without saying anything, and nobody noticed him go. We would never see him again. A month later, his body was finally found in the harbor, and police never figured out what happened. It's a cold case to this day. I didn't know him personally, but I think about him all the time. Did he fall? Or did someone push him? Why didn't anyone care enough to walk home with him? Maybe this wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been alone. Needless to say, the city started to feel a whole lot less safe. But at 20 years old, I didn't have the same understanding of danger as I do now as a 30-year-old. My life carried on. A couple months passed, and it was early 2025. A friend of mine was assaulted badly while cycling back home after a party. He was found in critical condition, his body lying halfway on the road and halfway on the sidewalk. His head had been smashed on the curb, and his jaw was completely shattered. He was a big guy in every sense possible, not the sort of guy you could push around easily. As he was recovering in the hospital, he couldn't make sense of what had happened. He had no idea why he was attacked on his bike, and the police didn't find his attacker. 2 other students that I knew from my school were also brutally assaulted for no reason. Additionally, I learned that another engineering student from my boyfriend's school had gone missing back in 2012. I still cycled everywhere because I had no other choice. I lived 5 miles away from my school and had no other means of transportation. This meant I cycled approximately 10 to 20 miles every day, which I'd done since 2012. One night in the spring of 2015, I was cycling back home from a party with my boyfriend. I'd had a few drinks, but wasn't drunk, just tired. My boyfriend was annoying me because he wasn't waiting for me, and the distance between us kept growing. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a man jumped on me and kicked my bike. I'd been cycling so much that riding this bike was second nature to me. Although the bike fell to the ground, I managed not to fall down with it, I resisted my attacker and remained standing. I reached for my fallen bike with my left hand, trying to grasp the handlebars. The man kicked my hand, but I'd already taken hold of the handlebars. He kicked me again and again, but I continued lifting the bike, despite the pain. He said something to me, but I didn't hear his words. I turned to look towards my boyfriend. He was a bit far away, but he'd stopped cycling, and his eyes were locked on me. He's going to help me, I thought. The man will see that I'm not alone. But my boyfriend turned his back on me. My heart dropped as he pedaled away. It was the dead of night, and there was no one else. I was on my own. The man was still kicking me, trying to make me let go. My hand was blue, but my grip remained strong. The sight of my boyfriend cycling away had filled me with pure rage. It still fills me with rage just thinking about it now. But my fury served me well. The man was holding a beer bottle in his hand. I grabbed it with my free hand and smashed it into his face, the alcohol burning his eyes. I picked up my bike and hopped on. He kicked at me one more time, but I managed to stay upright. In a split second, I launched myself forward and started pedaling away. He chased me, but I was faster. I pedaled until I was numb, until I could no longer breathe. I know I escaped something terrible that night. The trauma left me unable to describe his appearance to authorities, unfortunately. I'll never know for sure whether my experience was connected to the other attacks. They all happened on the same route, but I was the only female victim. The others were all male. All I know is that the peaceful image I'd previously had of this coastal French city was nothing but a cruel facade. In addition to the attacks I've mentioned, about 20 people have died in the harbor in the past decade or so. Some by accident, some by intention. It's been 10 years since my own experience, and I can still remember the look on my ex-boyfriend's face when he turned his back on me at the moment I needed him most. I hope I never meet either of these men again.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producers are Noah Fouts and Elizabeth Flood. Our audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Gerardo Orlando. Until next time, stay safe out there.
Hi, I'm Grace, host of Red Rum True Crime Podcast. These cases focus on the true victims of crime. Why not jump in at episode 114, the tragic murder of Jasmine and Aaliyah? The main suspect in this case gave an extremely bizarre interview to a number of press reporters whilst he was drunk and reportedly high. He speaks about an awful lot on camera and has this completely inappropriate laughing and chuckling response when talking about the case. He may even have thought he was gonna get away with the double murder he'd been accused of, but what he didn't know was that 2 undercover officers were on their way to catch him out, and he easily and willingly took the bait. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Red Rum True Crime. That's Red Rum, murder backwards, REDRUM True Crime.